The interrogation chamber was our pride and joy, a masterpiece of psychological and physiological manipulation. Lieutenant Crixus stood before the array of instruments, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the soft blue glow of the neural scanners. As our most accomplished interrogator, he had broken the will of every species we'd encountered, from the hive mind parasites of Centauri Beta to the silicon-based philosophers of the Andromeda Rim. Beautiful equipment, Crixus hummed, running his sensory appendages over the newest addition to our arsenal. The pain amplifier looked almost artistic, its silver tendrils arranged in a spiral pattern. The human nervous system is remarkably similar to the Verdaxian water dwellers. This should work perfectly. I watched through the observation window as the medical drones prepared the human. They had removed its primitive fabric coverings, revealing more of that disturbing pink skin. The specimen appeared male, according to our anatomical studies, with unusual markings across its upper torso. Some kind of decorative scarring, perhaps? Sir called out research assistant Plex, her voice wavering slightly. The baseline readings are unusual. Explain, I demanded, moving to her monitoring station. The human's pain threshold appears to be fluctuating. One moment it registers as terminal sensitive, the next it's showing resistance levels that would impress a Chronaxian death beast. And its brain activity. She gestured at the chaotic wave patterns on her screen. Fascinating, Crixus interrupted, his enthusiasm making his crystal plates chime. A defense mechanism we haven't encountered before. This will make breaking it even more satisfying. The human lay strapped to the interrogation table, still wearing that unnerving smile. Its eyes remained closed, but something about its relaxed posture bothered me. Most specimens struggled, or at least showed signs of stress. Begin with Protocol 7, I ordered. Full spectrum neural mapping while testing pain response. Crixus practically sparkled with joy. An aggressive choice, Captain. Most specimens don't experience Protocol 7 until week 3. He moved to the control panel, his appendages dancing across the surface. Though I doubt we'll need more than a day with such a primitive species. The medical drones positioned the neural probes. The pain amplifier hummed to life. Everything was proceeding according to standard procedure. Then the human opened its eyes. Subject is awake, announced Plex. Preparing first wave of weight, she frantically adjusted her instruments. Sir, the readings, they're not making sense. Explain, I demanded again, but before she could answer, a sound filled the chamber. The human was making a rhythmic vocalization. What did they call it? Ah yes, laughter. Good morning, it said in perfect galactic standard. Nice toys you've got here. Mind if I take a closer look? The restraints hadn't moved. The neural probes were still in position. Yet somehow, watching the human's face, I knew with terrible certainty that we were no longer in control of this situation. Begin Protocol 7, I ordered, trying to keep the uncertainty from my voice. Maximum intensity. The human's smile widened. Oh yes, it said. Please do. Protocol 7 failed spectacularly. So did Protocols 8 through 13. By the time we initiated Protocol 14, even Crixus had lost his characteristic shimmer. Impossible, he muttered, reviewing the data from our latest attempt. The pain amplifier is functioning at maximum capacity. The neural probes are perfectly calibrated, yet the specimen shows no signs of distress. The human had maintained that unsettling smile throughout every procedure. Worse, it had started humming. The simple, repeating melody drove 3 of our research assistants to request transfers. Perhaps a different approach, suggested Plex, who had stopped trembling every time the human looked at her and had moved straight into a kind of numb acceptance. The psychological protocols. I authorized the shift in methodology. The hallucination generators engaged, filling the chamber with scenarios designed to break even the strongest psyche. The human watched the horrors we projected with mild interest, occasionally offering critique. Nice touch with the flesh-eating parasites, it commented during Simulation 17. But you know what would make it scarier? If they burst out of the victim's eyes instead of their chest. Just a suggestion. By the end of the 3rd day, we had gone through every protocol in our database. The human had not only resisted them all but seemed to be genuinely enjoying itself. The facility staff grew increasingly unsettled. Did anyone else notice the lights flickering in sequence with its humming? Asked junior researcher Mira during our emergency review session. And I swear the temperature drops whenever it laughs. Coincidence, I declared, but my upper tentacles coiled tightly against my thorax. Focus on the data. There must be something we're missing. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent call from the security station. 3 guards had reported hearing whispers in empty corridors. All of them swore the voice belonged to the human, despite the specimen being securely confined in the interrogation chamber. Captain Varlox approached me after the meeting, his crystalline form dulled with stress. There's something else. The specimen. It knows things it couldn't possibly know. Explain. During Protocol 12, it mentioned my clutch mate's name, the one who died in the Proxima Initiative. Information that's sealed in classified records. His plates clink together nervously, and it keeps calling us by our names we never shared. The security feeds showed the human still strapped to the interrogation table, still smiling, still humming that maddening tune. But now I noticed something else. The neural probes we'd attached to monitor its brain activity. They weren't sending data to our systems anymore. They were receiving it. Sir Plex's voice crackled over the comm. The specimen is requesting your presence. It says it's ready to demonstrate proper interrogation techniques. I ordered an immediate lockdown of the chamber, triple-checked the restraints, increased the guard presence. But watching the security feed, seeing that unwavering smile, I knew we had made a terrible miscalculation. The human spoke again, its voice coming not from the chamber's speakers, but somehow directly into my mind. You know, Captain, there's an art to breaking someone. You can't just jump straight to maximum pain. You have to build up to it. Let me show you how it's done. The lights throughout the facility flickered in perfect rhythm with its words. In the staff lounge 6 levels up, a group of researchers suddenly screamed as their neural implants activated without command. In the security hub, every screen displayed the same image, the human's smiling face. Let's start with Protocol 1, it said cheerfully. But this time, I'll be running the experiment. Don't worry, I learned so much from watching you. This is going to be educational. That's when we discovered our second critical mistake. We had assumed the restraints were keeping the human contained. We never considered that maybe, just maybe, it was choosing to stay. Chief Medical Officer Nexara burst into my office without announcing herself, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with agitation. The data crystals in her hands glowed an angry red, matching her mood. Captain Varlox, this stops now, she declared, spreading the crystals across my desk. Look at these readings. The human isn't just resisting our tests. It's adapting, learning, evolving. I activated the nearest crystal, and the holographic data made my digestive sacs clench. The human's neural patterns had changed dramatically over the past week. Each new test we administered seemed to make it stronger. Impossible, I muttered, but Nexara cut me off. 3 hours ago, we subjected it to enough neurotoxins to kill a kraken beast. Know what happened? Its cells started producing an antidote, not just neutralizing the toxin, but synthesizing its own improved version. The security feed showed the human still in the interrogation chamber, now surrounded by twice as many restraints. Not that it mattered. We all knew they were purely symbolic at this point. Permission to speak freely. Captain Nexara's luminescence dimmed to a worried purple. We need to terminate this specimen immediately. The risk is too great. As if in response to her words, every crystal on my desk suddenly pulsed in sync with the human's heartbeat. The sound echoed through the room, a steady, mocking rhythm. The human's biochemistry. Nexara continued, her voice shaking. It's unlike anything we've seen. During the last neural scan, it didn't just resist the probe. It sent a signal back through it. 3 research assistants are still in medical stasis, their minds trapped in what they describe as an endless nightmare. I reached for the emergency termination controls, but my fingers froze inches from the panel. Not from fear, but from a sudden, horrible realization. How many different termination protocols have we already tried? Nexara's patches flickered anxiously. 17. Each one more lethal than the last. After the 3rd attempt, it started suggesting improvements to our methods, said something about efficiency and unnecessary suffering. The human's voice suddenly filled the room, though the comm system remained inactive. You know, Captain, your species has such interesting ideas about mortality, but I think you're approaching it all wrong. Here, let me demonstrate a more effective technique. Nexara screamed. Her bioluminescent patches flared brilliant white, then began darkening one by one, like stars going out. She collapsed, twitching, as knowledge no mortal mind was meant to contain poured directly into her consciousness. Fascinating response, the human mused. Much more dramatic than the research assistants. Must be something about the heightened awareness of medical officers. They understand exactly what's happening to them. I tried to reach the medical emergency button, but my limbs wouldn't respond. The human's influence had spread throughout the facility's neural interface system. We had given it access to everything, one probe and sensor at a time. "Don't worry about Nexara," the human said cheerfully. "She'll recover. Mostly. I just wanted to test a theory about your species' pain thresholds. You've all been so helpful in showing me your methods, I thought it only fair to share some of mine." Through the haze of terror, I finally understood. We hadn't been conducting tests on the human. It had been conducting tests on us. And judging by the satisfaction in its voice, we were performing exactly as expected. The facility's daily status report showed 23 personnel missing. Not dead, not injured, simply gone. The security feeds showed them walking into rooms or turning corners, then vanishing. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just empty corridors and abandoned workstations. Report, my voice echoed through the emergency command center we'd established 3 levels away from the interrogation chamber. The remaining staff huddled around monitoring stations, jumping at every shadow. Lieutenant Kara, now acting as head of security since Crixus's mysterious disappearance, stepped forward. "Sir, the anomalies are spreading. The quantum computers are generating random strings of human military codes. The gravity generators keep cycling between 0 and triple normal strength. And the specimen." She paused, her scales pale with fear. It started naming us, one by one. In the exact order we vanish. The main screen showed the human, still wearing that eternal smile. The restraints remained in place, now more for our comfort than any pretense of containment. Several guards swore they'd seen the human walking freely through the station. Despite video confirmation, it had never left the chamber. "Security systems are compromised," announced Plex from her station. "The automated defenses are. Sir, they're turning inward, targeting our own personnel." Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility, then shifted to that haunting melody the human loved to hum. The sound came from every speaker, every comm unit, even the neural implants we used to communicate. Sir Mira's voice cracked with panic. "Remember those missing personnel? We found them. At least we found the recordings." The screen split into multiple feeds. Each showed a different chamber, a different corridor, a different lab. In every feed, our missing staff worked at their stations as if nothing was wrong. But the timestamps, some were from yesterday, some from next week, several from 30 years ago. The timestamps must be malfunctioning, I declared, but deep in my thoracic cavity, I knew better. The human's voice drifted through the facility, no longer bothering with the comm system. "You know what I find interesting, Captain? Your species developed quantum entanglement communications, mastered faster than light travel, even learned to manipulate gravity itself. But you never quite figured out consciousness transfer, never understood how to separate mind from matter. Would you like me to show you?" 3 more staff members vanished between one heartbeat and the next. The security feeds showed them still at their posts, endlessly repeating the same tasks, trapped in loops of time we couldn't comprehend. Captain Kara whispered, her voice tight with terror. "The specimen, it's starting to change." The video feed from the interrogation chamber showed the human's form flickering, shifting between states of matter like a quantum particle refusing to be observed. The restraints passed through it as if through smoke, then solidified again, then became something else entirely. "Did you really think?" The human asked, its voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere, that this physical form was anything more than a courtesy? A familiar shape to put you at ease? "Oh, Captain, you should have checked where I came from. What division I served in. The experiments I volunteered for." The lights failed. In the darkness, that terrible smile was the only thing we could see. And it was growing wider. The emergency archives finally decoded the human's military files. What we found turned our blood to ice. Plex's hands trembled as she read the report aloud in our barricaded command center, her voice barely a whisper. "Subject designation Commander Jake Stone. Division Quantum Consciousness Program. Status volunteer for Project Singularity. She paused, her scales losing all color. Captain, it says he was their first successful consciousness transcendence subject. Explain, I demanded, though my tentacles coiled in dread. They found a way to separate consciousness from physical form. The human body in our custody. It's just a vessel. A shell he chose to inhabit. Plex's voice cracked. We didn't capture him. He let us take him. The facility's lights pulsed in agreement, and that terrible voice echoed through our minds once again. Finally putting the pieces together, Captain? I was wondering how long it would take. The main screen activated on its own, showing footage from the human military installation where we'd found him. We watched in horror as security forces surrounded him. Watched as he smiled that familiar smile. Watched as he deliberately stepped into their containment field. Your species has been studying us, testing our weaknesses, probing our defenses, the human said, his voice filled with dark amusement. So we decided to let you capture one of us, someone who could study you back. Lieutenant Kara scrambled to seal the command center's quantum-locked doors, but they melted away like smoke. Through the opening, we saw the human standing there, still somehow simultaneously restrained in the interrogation chamber, according to our monitors. The fascinating thing about consciousness, he continued, stepping into the room as we backed away, is that once you free it from physical constraints, the possibilities become endless. I can be here, there, everywhere. I can reach into your minds, slip between moments of time, exist in multiple states simultaneously. The horror of our situation finally dawned on me. Every test, every scan, every probe we'd used had given him more access, more understanding, more control over our technology and our minds. Would you like to see what real transcendence looks like, he asked. His form shifted, reality bending around him. One moment he was human, the next something that made our minds scream in protest. Geometries that shouldn't exist, dimensions folding in on themselves, consciousness given impossible form. Your torture devices helped, you know, he said conversationally, his voice coming from a mouth that was everywhere and nowhere. Each new neural interface gave me better access to your systems. Each attempt to break into my mind just showed me how to break into yours. Plex screamed as her neural implants overloaded. Security monitors exploded in cascading waves. The quantum computers began solving equations that shouldn't exist, revealing truths that warped the very fabric of space around us. This facility now exists in 7 different temporal states simultaneously, the human explained, almost apologetically. Your missing personnel aren't gone. They're just experiencing time, differently. Some are living the same moment over and over. Others are scattered across decades. A few got to see what lies between seconds. They didn't handle that very well. Through the command center's viewport, I watched in horror as sections of the station began to flicker in and out of existence. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling around us. But don't worry, Commander Stone said, his smile now a tear in the universe itself. This is just the beginning of your education. After all, you wanted to understand humanity. His laugh echoed through dimensions we were never meant to perceive. Let me show you what we really are. The emergency lockdown protocols meant nothing now. How do you contain something that exists in multiple dimensions? How do you run from a being that can step through time itself? Security teams, report, I called into the comm system. Static answered, punctuated by screams and that endless, maddening laughter. Fascinating survival instinct, Commander Stone's voice echoed from every surface. Your species responds to fear by clustering together. Safety in numbers, you think. But all you're doing is making my job easier. The remaining command staff huddled in the emergency bunker, watching in horror as the security feeds showed the humans systematically hunting down every member of the facility. He turned our own testing protocols against us, each demonstration more terrifying than the last. Remember Protocol 7, his voice dripped with false concern. The neural pain amplifier? Let me show you how it works when properly calibrated. Through the cameras, we watched him approach a group of security officers. They fired their weapons, but the energy blasts passed through him like he was smoke. He reached out, touched each of their neural implants, and they collapsed, experiencing every moment of pain we had tried to inflict on him simultaneously. You should be proud, Captain, he called out, knowing exactly where we were hiding. Your research helped me perfect these techniques, though I think the temporal displacement tests were my favorite. On screen 6, we watched research assistant Mira trying to run down a corridor. She passed a time distortion field and aged 30 years in an instant. Another step, she was young again. Another, nothing but dust. Another, an infant. She screamed through all of it, consciousness intact as her body shifted through time. Please, Kara begged, her scales now completely white with terror. We surrender. We'll give you anything you want. Laughter shook the station's foundations. But you already gave me everything I wanted. Access to your technology, understanding of your capabilities, a thorough analysis of your weaknesses. Reality rippled around us. Though I suppose there is one more thing. The bunker walls became transparent like glass. Through them, we could see the same scene playing out infinitely in every direction. Versions of ourselves experiencing different torments, different ends, different horrifying fates, all orchestrated by the being we had so arrogantly thought we could contain. Your cooperation in this experiment has been invaluable, Commander Stone said, now standing among us though none of us saw him enter. My superiors will be very interested in the data I've collected. Superiors, the word escaped my mouth before I could stop it. His smile widened beyond the physical limits of his face. Did you think I was the only one? Humanity's quantum consciousness program has thousands of volunteers. And now, thanks to your generous help, we know exactly how to deal with your species. The station's quantum core began to overload. Reality buckled and twisted around us. The last thing I saw before consciousness fractured was that terrible smile, and the last thing I heard was his final mocking words. Thank you for your participation in this field test. Humanity sends its regards.